What do you do when you feel overwhelmed? What about disconnected or just stuck, just keeping up? Today's guest is on a mission to help leaders, teams, and families move from this space and this perspective of survival to a place of sustainable impact. With experience as a high school principal, organizational COO, and leadership coach, she knows how to build systems and restore clarity. Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is to help you create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Through inspiring conversations, practical strategies, and actionable insights, we empower educators, leaders, and change makers just like yourself, foster trust, collaboration, and provide them ultimately with the tools, resources, and methodologies to create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Ms. Wiggins,
I'm doing
how you
great.
doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing awesome. How about you?
I am phenomenal, actually. And I'm not just saying that. Sometimes, in conversations or in passing, people ask, like, how are you? And you just say good because you don't really want to get into it. I am really in a great space, super excited about this conversation. And before we get too far into the conversation, can you just introduce yourself and introduce yourself in a way without using titles? How would you communicate who you are?
Without using titles, I love that because I've been in several spaces where I've asked others to do that so that you can identify with who you are as a person and not by what you do. And so we become human beings and not human doers. And so if I had to introduce myself like that, I am a passionate individual or woman about connecting, about learning, about growing, about collaborating, about supporting and providing environments of support. And that is my calling to help not only do that for myself, but to do it for others as I'm around. And that doesn't just span in the workplace and things like that. That expands in the home, that spans at the grocery store, at church, all of those things. And so if I had to identify myself as a human being and what I was called to do, I would say that those would be it.
How did you know that you were called to do all of those things? Like, what was the moment for you?
I wouldn't say there was a signifying moment. I think let me say this. If you go back, if you sit and you think like, what are the things that bring you joy, right? Like true joy, not like, oh, I'm happy, but then that happy is fleeting. Like, what are the things that bring you true? Like, I feel good. I don't feel burnt out. I don't feel, depleted. You could probably sit back and think about what those things were when you were a child, right? And so when I was a little girl, I think back to bringing all of my at the time it was dittos, and I might be dating myself when I say dittos. That there, for those who are listening that are not of Gen X or Boomers, those are copies, duplicate copies that they made on the copy machine. And so at the end of the school year, my teacher, they would be throwing all of those things out, or their books that they were using to teach it. And I wanted them, and I took them all home. My backpack was full of these things, and I wanted to go home and play school with all my stuffed animals. My friends, like when it's time to play, I'm like, let's play school. And they're like, we don't want to play school. I'm like, yes, we do want to play school. That's fun. And so I was so, and my family would say, like, I was so excited about learning, about teaching, about just being in that space. And when ideas would just come, I was just like such a nerd, if you will, for that. And so, of course, those things kind of went by the wayside as you got into corporate America. And I worked in corporate and all those things, but I found myself teaching and training in corporate. And then when I came here to North Carolina 20 years ago, I was still working in like the corporate space or getting my degree in business. And I started substitute teaching so that I can just have the same schedule as my children, who are now grown, but I have a young one now as well. And it was like a no-brainer. Like, and I know people like, I'm just good at stuff. Like, yeah, there are people that are great at stuff. And I think that your capability of being great at something, that should also identify what your calling is when you can do it with your eyes closed.
That's good.
And that for me was not in education and teaching, but it was in that space that provided people with a nurturing environment that allowed them to forward and make mistakes. And in fact, I remember one student, because I was student teaching, I'm not student teaching, substitute teaching in a space, and I ended up being long term because their teacher took ill. And I remember a student at the end of the year said to me, it was eighth grader, and he said, in the beginning of the year, we didn't like you. And you came with your rules and your structure and all this other stuff, and we didn't like you. He said, but you know what? We love you. And he was like, and you know who did that? You did that. You did that. That's just like a stamping point for me. And that was 20 years ago. And I remember his face, I remember his energy, and I remember him pointing with both of his fingers at like that. And I remember his name and all of those things. And that, if I have to say that was a identifiable moment or a stamping moment amongst many, that would be one of them.
How would you recommend other people either unpack to be able to identify their moment, or recreate those moments in their lives today so that they can continue to have that joy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the things would be, again, take it back to your childhood. Think about the things that you had said, I want to be this. Like in your childhood innocence, life has not happened. Life has not begun life to try to stamp on your dreams. And so when in your childhood, you have this sense of blissful ignorance, where you are making these decisions and you are deciding on things without having an awareness of how lives, without having an awareness how individuals could speak death into your life. And so you're like, I want to be a mermaid astronaut. And you're like, that's amazing. Like, like, wow. And so if you like kind of just spend some time, I would recommend for other people, I journal a lot. And it's unstructured journaling. And so whatever's on my mind in the morning when I'm writing or whatever I've had a dream about, like I'm writing that down. I'm capturing those moments because again, life starts a life and you could forget about those things. And I think that God speaks to you in those moments when it's quiet. And so when you start just kind of reflecting back on like, what did I used to like to do in my childhood, but unstructured, don't try to make sense of it. Don't try to organize it into a book or a thought, just write it. Like I used to love doing this and that, and then kind of like investigate that. Like if you played with dolls, like what did you do when you played with those dolls? And then I would strongly recommend, I think that therapy is one of the best, and it's proactive, not like something you do because now you felt like you're off, so you need to just talk to a therapist so you can get back on. I think that is a proactive measure. It should actually be included in our regular healthcare system. Like we get our teeth checked and our bodies checked, we should also be getting our mind and our wellness checked. And so unpacking that with the therapist too, so that you can, if there were traumatizing moments in your childhood that you're trying not to relive, that you can be able to navigate through those things so that you can see those moments that brought you joy.
That is so good. And it ties in to the work that you do. And based upon the work that you do, your work bridges that personal and professional. And you believe that true leadership starts from within.
Yeah.
And I personally believe that better people are better in every aspect of their lives. Better people are better husbands and spouses. Better people are better teachers and leaders, like better. And a lot of times we're trying to identify the tactic or the practical strategy to be better so that we don't have to be accountable for actually becoming a better person. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about what your process looks like in ensuring that people are looking within so that they can show up as better leaders?
Yeah. The process looks like presence, really. Like, where are you being the most present? And is that serving you well? What does that look like when you are being present in the realm of empathy? Are you present, but then also thinking about how that affects others? So it also looks like putting your ego aside. Like we operate in such an egotistical society, and that just has become the norm. We're thinking about me, 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 me. But we're not thinking about how has the me that you have shown up to be affected the others around you. Is there a possibility that there's a different perspective? I did a talk and a while back, and this was a reflection that I principled through the pandemic. And during that time, it helped me to reflect that I am the only person that has ever seen through my eyes. And that was like mind blowing. Like, wow, you never thought about that. Like oh yeah, you are the only person who has ever seen through your eyes. So there
Yeah.
is a possibility of another perspective. For example, I could say something as far as to another person, hey, can you go hand me that orange chair? And they could be scrambling around, looking for the orange chair when I'm looking right at it. I have a couple ways that I could respond. I could respond in aggravation and agitation and sarcasm, like, don't you see the orange chair? What are you doing? All of the things. Or I could stop and think, I'm the only person that sees through my eyes, who's ever seen through my eyes. There is a possibility of another perspective. And so I could actually ask the question, what color chairs do you see? Not do you see the orange chair, because then that is putting on the notion that things are only the way that I see it. So if I'm
Mm.
asking, like, what color chairs do you see? And they say red, I can say, oh, now I have another perspective of how you see things. So now that changes my level of communication to not communicating in the egotistical way, like this is the way that I see it, but an empathetic way to now say, I can't say color of something because that may not resonate with someone else. I may need to say chair. Now, if they say they don't see a chair, I'm like, well, what do you call it? What are the things over there? They may say a stool. And I'm like, okay, and so that's the process of being able to have an understanding that there is a possibility of other perspectives. There's a possibility of things that happen behind the scene. Like I would tell my children, we've said this before, I didn't grow up an adult. I was born at night, but not last night, like all of those things, because our children also don't believe that there was a history before them. It's like today, right now. Like,
Exactly.
no, actually, there was a lot of me before you.
Mm. I love one of the things that you just said that I wrote down. It said, how has the me I chose to be impacted everything around me? And
Mhm.
there's a possibility that I see things from a different perspective because I'm the only person that has looked out through my eyes. What I hear when I quote those various perspectives and things that you've communicated is a foundation of emotional intelligence.
Right.
How do you believe that emotional intelligence and sustainable systems intersect in your work?
Hmm. Um, the intersection happens with the thought of being proactive. It's a proactive thought process of preparing yourself for longevity. And so when you're reactive, I think that that means like that's that survival where you're running away from death or running away from things falling apart, running away from things going wrong because you're constantly trying to, all right, this is broken. All right, this. But when you're thinking about sustainability and you're thinking about proactivity, you're preparing for life on a consistent basis. And so having that mindset of emotional intelligence helps you to understand that things can be better. It's not all bad. Like even in the worst of situations, you can think like, okay, things can be better. Like there is a pivot. You can pivot from this. It's important to recognize and identify your emotions and understand that people have them. It's okay to live in them. So I think about that even from the perspective of being a parent and coaching young parents. And when children are even older parents, when children are crying and things like that, the first thing you want them to do is shut up, right? Stop. Don't do that. Cut it out. Enough of that crying, all of the things. But I say, let them cry. That's their emotion. They have the right to feel that. That may not feel good. It is okay for you to live in that space. And now that you've lived there, what's next? We don't stay there, but we do need to be able to experience that. Same thing when I was being an administrator in the school, I would say things like when students would be, defiant or doing something in class, and I won't even say defiant because that could be interpreted several ways, but let's say they were talking in a classroom or whatever, and a teacher's like, all right, I need you to move your seat. But if you stay there and you're now trying to be in survival mode to save face for your class and continue what you're doing, but you got to kind of have control that your ego, get your things. I said, move, you need to be. Now, nothing is living. Everybody is focusing their attention on this negative part of it. you think about it from another perspective and emotional intelligence and empathetic way. If you were in that situation and you had to move too, you're not going to get up with preppiness and perkness and all excitedness. You're going to be moving slow too. If the kid is complying and he's moving or she's moving, you continue going. I would tell students all the time, why do we still have reality drama TV? Because people watch it. And as long as it has views, it will stay on. But if we stop watching it, we stop giving it the attention, then it goes away. So you pivot and you give your attention to life and not things that are draining.
When you talked about survival mode, I circled it on my paper here. And I think that a lot of us are in that on a daily basis. Just kind of operating from a space of survival, how we're operating in organizations, how we're operating in relationships, how we're operating just internally. What are some of the most common signs that a team or organization or even a leader is stuck in survival mode?
Yeah. One of what you would think is the obvious sign, I think it's only obvious to me because I've been in this work, is when your response is a trauma bonding response. Like if someone is telling you there's an issue with the system, or it didn't work, or it's broken, or there needs to be a change, or there needs to be another perspective, and you respond with things like, yeah, I've heard that a lot, but nothing. Like that's not a response. Like, or like, if you are giving an answer, or like, for instance, I think like if teachers are sending messages home to parents that I have a lot of students who did not complete their work. What do you want me to do with that information? Like what are you doing with that information? Like those types of things. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I mean, so those type of things, when you are responding, or you are communicating, another way, I guess this would be considered under my trauma bonding umbrella, if you are communicating in a way that is just communicating the problem and not a solution, you're not solution oriented in your communication. It's just, I need to just tell you guys what are all the things that are wrong, or all the things that need to be fixed, or these are the things that are coming to me. And you're left with people just looking like, oh, we're supposed to figure this out, or you have a thought process of, because I tell you that you're not the only one, that should make you feel good. Now I feel comfortable. No, oh, okay, it's not just me. No, if it's not just me, then my thought process is there is a problem and we need to come up with a solution for how do we fix it. And so I think those are sure ways to recognize that you are stuck in survival. If you are constantly is that ego statement of, so going back to like my example about having varying perspectives and understanding that there are other perspectives. When people are asking questions like why, then as a leader or as a organization, you are responding with excuses. There's excusatory responses, or you are responding really defensive and not sitting back and thinking about, well, the why is actually them trying to put on my eyes so that they can get another level of perspective, and see why I may have made these decisions so that they can understand it. And so those types of things I would say are when you can really identify that, okay, you're stuck in survival and we need to kind of shift that mindset, shift the language, give other levels of perspectives, so that we can start to move the needle forward and we don't stay there.
That process from going to survival to a state of momentum is what I hear. Seems like a lot. And it seems like it takes a lot of buy-in. It seems like it takes individual, but then collective ownership and unified front. It takes work. How do you recommend someone listening to this right now that even is triggered by maybe what you're communicating, but is still committed to doing this work? Where do they start, and what would be their step-by-step process on getting them from survival to the next stage?
Yeah. So one of the things that I used to do in education, I think you would probably even resonate with this in any educator. And I know we're not just speaking with educators, but I like to use these examples because they can go for any area of your life, is There's two things actually. Let me start with this one. This is what I was not going to go to first, but I will. You have to understand, in order for things to fix, there has to be something that has to break. Right? Like if you are stuck in that survival mode and that's how you've always done things, which is one of the statements that that identifies that you are in a toxic environment. This is how we've always done it. And so if you've always done it that way, you need to understand that if you're stuck in survival, you gotta break that way. And that doesn't feel good. And it's not going to feel good. So if you're one of the recommendations, if you're going to do this work, you have to be ready to feel uncomfortable. You have to be ready to understand that it is going to take some shifting and some uncomfortability and some frustrations because you have been doing the thing the same way. And so we oftentimes, like ministers, will use situations like birth, like, it's messy, it's not great. Even when you're planting something, if you are in horticulture and you're planting, you got to get dirty, you got to pull those, we got to break something. If you're in ministry and or you are someone who lives by your Christian values and things of that nature, we know there is breaking, there's refining, there's burning, there's things that have to happen. If you do pottery and things like that, you got to burn it to be able to refine it. Like, so to do the work, don't be afraid because you're like, that's a lot of work. Guess what? When I got my doctoral studies, that was a lot of work. When you are starting kindergarten, it's a lot of work. So if you take it, I like to think about things like as children, childlike as well. And so if you take yourself back to being a kindergartner and you say, I'm not going to do school because that's a lot of work. Now you look at yourself now, like, did you stop there? And so I guess one of the best things that I'm trying to say too, because sometimes it could be really discouraging or scary, like, oh, I don't want to do that because that is going to hurt. Think about all of the things that you have done that took a lot of work. Where you are now, that took a lot of work. So if you take yourself back for a moment to before you started that, you've done a lot of things that took a lot of work. There were hard things. I could say now, oh, getting these degrees was easy. But if I go back and think, no, it wasn't. It was hard. It took a lot of hard work. So that's one of the things about like really understanding that it's going to be hard. It is hard work. And then the other thing is, that second thing that I was going to say is that comes from the educational standpoint, but this is something that I was like, oh, this is a no-brainer for me, is looking at the highest leverage. When you are attacking an issue or you're trying to make impact and have some type of sustainability and changing, if you are just trying to work at the thing that's easy or the small thing, you're going to be working forever. But if you take the thing that's the highest leverage, that is going to take care of all the other things. Just like when you go to the doctors, they're going to find the root cause, and that root cause is going to stop the headache that you've just been taking the Tylenol for.
Talk to me about highest leverage and what that means so that readers or listeners can understand.
Gotcha. So going back to the example that I mentioned, like highest leverage is the roots, like figuring out what the root thing is, the one thing that can, if you start thinking about all the little things that are happening that you're trying to fix, that you're like, okay, I can fix that, I can fix that. But if you dial back for a second and say, what's the one thing that actually those things branch off of that I can focus on, so that we're not spinning our wheels in survival, trying to work at fixing all of these little things. So going to that example of being at the doctor's, when you go to the doctor and you are telling them that you have these headaches or your vision is blurry, or your tooth aches or whatever, like for instance, the dentist sensitivity in your teeth. You don't want to just go and get some Sensodyne. You could, but the dentist is going to look and probably say like, you need a root canal or there's a cavity, and that's going to take care of all of the swelling, all of those things. But if you're just, managing, that's what it is. If you're just managing the symptoms and you're not taking care of the actual problem, then you stay in that mode. You stay in survival. If you go to the doctors and there's their blurry vision, they're looking at you. You've ever went to the doctors and you're like, I got a headache, and they're looking at your feet and you're like, excuse me, sir.
No,
Here. Not there, but the doctor knows that there are root issues that manifest themselves in these symptoms that happen in other places in our body, just like Chinese medicine. You go in the mall and they have this foot massage therapy stuff, and you're like, oh, who did it? Priscilla Schreier had talked before, and no, Sarah Jakes had talked before about pressure points in your hand and recognizing, and there's a lot of studies out there that if you massage certain parts of your hand, it would alleviate the stress in your body. Or if you touch the top of your head, that helps to calm your central nervous system. So those are like the types of things that you understand, that you can't just go ahead and manage the symptoms. You have to be able to get to the root, and that's what's going to create that sustainability and that longevity. Because if you're just doing the symptoms, you're going to constantly have the problem.
I know,
You ever think like schools, like in the summer, like what do y'all do? What they do is they rest from all of the stress management that they've been doing and staying in survival, and then they reduplicate the wheel again instead of thinking about, all right, what's the root that we need to really get to so that we can have a sustainable year, so that next year we just start identifying all the things that worked and we can find the next root and not continuously medicate the symptoms.
Let me talk about that though, because you mentioned the word sustainable a few times. Like, how do we as leaders, but then organizationally, go from survival to sustainable? Like, what is one thing someone could do tomorrow that could lead them to that place?
One thing. I would say one thing that they could do is take a pause, like stop for a moment. And because we're always going, and that's that human doing and not that human being, like stop, like have a break, take a pause, and be intentional with your break without feeling guilty, whether that pause. And I think that there should be several. Let me just say that, like, it shouldn't just be, all right, in the morning I'm pausing, and then in lunch I'm pausing. I used to do these things called not used to, I still do, called mindful moments, and it has developed a cadence just throughout my organization. But it was every 55 minutes, it was 5 minutes, I stopped and I did something that got me closer to feeling grounded. And so that may have been listening to a song. It may have been reading a scripture. It may have been doing a small devotional. It may have just been quietly shutting my eyes and letting the noise be silent. Those are some things when you start, I go by this mantra of a habit becomes a way of life. When you start there, you start to develop a habit of that, of recognizing that pausing is not lazy. It should not be frowned upon. You start to set boundaries, and when you and put it in your schedule. Like, don't just, oh, I'm going to take a pause sometime throughout the day, because if it ain't on the calendar, it ain't happening, right? And so put it on the calendar that this, and don't look at it like, if somebody says, if it's on your calendar for 1:30 and somebody says, can you meet at 1:30? No, because I used to call them too meetings with myself. No, I have a meeting. And value yourself just as much as you value everything else on your calendar. Put it on your calendar. If you have a meeting with yourself, you are just as important as the meeting with the next person or the next thing. We calendar doctor's appointments and all of those things. So it is important to calendar yourself.
That's so good. That's so good. Meetings with yourself. I don't think I have ever implemented that. And it's interesting because it's so simple to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and read scripture and go on a run and do these different things. But I've never taken the time to just pause and reflect. It's easy to schedule time in the end of the day to, all right, make sure you read 2 chapters of a book or you journal. But I have never in my schedule just put time to just be. And it's just you and you and your thoughts and you and your environment to just be able to take it all in. And what I hear is a lot of this is mindset shifts. Like, it's perspective shifts. It's shifting your pattern, your perspective, and it potentially will even lead to some of the people in your life shifting as well. If someone is feeling overwhelmed right now with even all of what you're communicating, because this is a transformation for them, what's the first step that you'd recommend someone to start regaining at least clarity and connection with themselves? Is it pausing?
I would say the first step is pause, because you can get yourself caught into a mind loop of thinking, I'm overwhelmed. What are the things I'm going to do? And so your mind automatically goes to okay, I need to do this, this, and this. I need to create a system. I need to, and you start mapping out your one, two, threes. You start looking at books to say, okay, what's, because you're thinking, I need something tangible. I need like, I need the thing. I need to be able to hold it. I need to be able to feel it. I need to now put it on my calendar. Now you're like, I got to schedule it in my day to do bam, 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 bam. I gotta create a system. I gotta get a calendar. I gotta draw it. I gotta, all the things. And so now you're stuck into overwhelm. And now it becomes a situation where you're like, I can't do it because I gotta do all the things. And it's as simple as do none of the things. Stop. Just stop for a moment and let yourself just sit and then see how that feels. And it's going to be uncomfortable at first because your mind is going to start gravitating towards all the things that you could, quote unquote, be doing during that time. And it's like you have to train your mind to say, no, I can't do those things if I can't be me. I can't feel okay. Then none of those things are going to matter in the long run. I can go, I can go, I can go. And there's going to be a moment where I don't go anymore. And so if I don't just stop for a second and let me just be, and let me just feel, even if that moment is crying because it is so overwhelming, let that out. Even if that moment is laughing because you're just like, sometimes in my moment, I'm talking to me. And as long as I don't answer me, I think it's okay. But I'm talking to me and I'm saying things like, now this is ridiculous. And I'm making little silly sounds. And I know that may sound crazy for a professional, but it is important to take yourself to that moment where you can just say, I can just stop and be me, because then also what it creates is a level of authenticity for yourself. It creates a level of transparency for yourself, because then now you can feel like I can just show up. You've ever heard people even say things like, take a moment and just dance, do your craziest dance, do your silliest dance, do those things. And if you've ever done it, the first time you do it, you feel stupid because you're like, is anybody looking? Does anybody see me? And then even when you look at yourself, you're like, oh, I feel embarrassed by doing that. Live in that embarrassment. Allow that for yourself, because if you can't laugh at your own self, then nobody can laugh at you. You won't let it happen. You're like, I'm not doing the thing. I'm not doing that. So the recommendation would be, again, like we went back to the whole thing of like people could say like, oh, that feels uncomfortable. Well, you got to break something to be able to fix it. And so breaking the rhythm of always doing and always having to fill up your space. In fact, today I do, like I said, mindful moments every Thursday, and today's mindful moment was giving time generously, and not like giving like time and that aspect, but being a noun, like how do you give your time generously? Do you give it with frustration and shortness and aggravation, or do you give it with compassion and love and kindness? And if you don't give yourself time, if you don't spend time on yourself, then you will give time that is not generous. And so all it goes twofold in that. And so if you start putting your time towards all of the things, thinking that you're going to gain fruit, benefits, all of those things, it is actually robbing you. And you're not going to be able to be fruitful, like the Bible says, your love, joy, peace, patience, and giving to other people, because you are now spent. You spent all your time somewhere else. And so, again, the recommendation would be just stop and force yourself, even when your brain says, no, I got to do. Stop. We think our brain controls us because it is the central part of our nervous system. But we have to, our brain is programmed to protect us and to, and to do so much for us. But it is a muscle that we have to work. And so we tell our brain, stop. And if we start giving our brain the tools that it needs to protect us, one of those tools will be, you need to rest. You need to stop. Our brain will begin to tell us that. Our body will, at least.
Sometimes the best thing to do in these seasons is to do nothing and to be present.
Mm-hmm.
And to do something that brings you joy, even if the response brings you embarrassment. Looking back, what advice would you give your younger self when you first started this journey of leading others to do this work?
Yeah, that is so funny because this year I am celebrating my 20th anniversary of being 26. In that 20, and I'm doing a little event on that same thing, like what I have told myself 20 years ago that has gotten me to this space 20 years later. And it would be the the cares of the, well, let me say it this way. Sometimes when people give you feedback to things about you, my younger self believed that the fact that they recognized it means that they're there and I have to catch up.
Mm.
My older self tells me, again, we don't oftentimes look at ourselves. Now, the pandemic has forced us before that we can only we're able to focus on us. But if we think about us not being in such in environments as this online, and where I can look at myself consistently, and we just think about going throughout our day, we might look in the mirror in the morning. We may look in the afternoon, and it's a possibility we look at night, but that's only 3 times that we're physically looking at ourselves. And so people see us more than we see ourselves. And just because they've seen something in us doesn't mean that it is something that has flourished in them, because they're also not looking at themselves. And so my older self would tell my younger self to take those advice and take what people's feedback would be and filter it through whatever means you need to filter it through. For me, it's filtering it through the Holy Spirit to say, okay, God, something was recognized in me. All right, help me to sift out the things that are not, and help me to focus on the things that are, but also not through the lens of I have to now work and catch up and tell them, okay, now I see it too, and I'm where you are. But more so is, thank you for that feedback. And now I do, the responsibility is not to them, it is to me. So I owe them nothing. And so that's what I would tell myself. Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And now your job is done. I owe you nothing. And I'm going to keep moving on from there. And so those are that's what the major thing that I've learned through the years of this work and through the 20 years of being this phenomenal 26. Yeah.
How do you stay grounded and, I don't know, just to sustain your leadership energy and the gift that you have in doing this work?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, getting up at 4. And I don't recommend this for everyone, but this is something that I started, and it wasn't a start, it was like really a push. And so I
Mm.
do get up at 4:30, and I read and I pray and I'm focusing and I'm having I call it my board meeting with God. I'm leaning on him to be able to pour into me what my next moves are, what I'm supposed to be doing. What I do in my work is not just work. It is what I do in my life. It is something that keeps me grounded, that sustains me. And is it perfect? No. Do I have moments where I'm just like, all right, I am done with this? Yes. But in those moments, I also recognize that it is my weakness that is not going to keep me going. I have to go back. Like this past weekend, my pastor's message was daily deliverance, and coming from the Lord's Prayer, like that daily. Like we think about daily food, we think about daily forgiveness, but we don't think about daily freedom. Like it's the whole notion of you like just because I brushed my teeth this morning doesn't mean and they're clean now. That don't mean they're gonna stay clean. I gotta do it every single day. Sometimes 3 times. You should do it twice if you're listening, but sometimes 3 or 4. And so daily, the way I stay grounded is I have to daily get a check-in. I have to plug my phone up daily. So I plug in daily so that I can say, all right, what is it? And I reflect on my day of like, all right, yesterday I totally lost my cool. What was it that I showed up like that? How, why, what aggravated me? Like, for instance, time is something that is very important to me. And when people waste time, I am very aggravated by that. And so I am not strong when people are wasting time. And so I have to then check that daily and say, all right, recognizing that sometimes some people have time blindness and they don't have a sense of time. And I have a great sense of time. How do I still operate in those spaces where I am not losing all my ever loving mind in those situations? But I got to be honest with myself too. I can't think that, oh, I got it all together. I've done the work today, so I'm good forever. It's like, no, no, you got to recheck that. We got to keep rechecking that and redoing that. So yeah.
If you had 60 seconds What's one message you would want every listener to take away, not just from this conversation, but from you as well?
Hmm. Oh, goodness. One thing to take away from the conversation, I would say is I think the biggest thing is back to what I said before, give yourself the possibility that there is another perspective. And with that, I think that we can have stronger relationships, stronger connections, stronger conversations, a stronger community, a stronger society, stronger culture, if we would just stop to understand that we're not the only one existing in it. And there is a possibility that there is a different perspective, because there is not just a possibility, there is the reality that everyone has lived in their own space and in their time and have their own experiences. And so understanding again that there is the possibility of a different perspective.
Where can we find you, support you, and continue to promote the various work that you're doing?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website. I've shortened it. It's bit.ly/TL collaborative. And that is TL collaborative coaching, excuse me. And it's all lowercase, so you can put that in there. You can follow me on social media. My platform is open. It's at Dr. T Wiggins, or at TL underscore collaborative, and on LinkedIn. And so that's where I post my reflections, my pouring in, um, you know, tools of resources to be able to equip you or help you into moving from survival to sustainability. And there you'll find where I do the mindful moments every Thursday at 12:30. And those are just little life tools that you can use in the moment to get you through that day and even the week. And then come back and plug in again and do it daily or reflect back on it. One big thing, if I will, this Monday, I am releasing Mindful Moment Reset Series, which is a guided um, resource, reflective book where it's taking a culmination, not all of the mindful moments, and there's several that have been recorded and posted on demand, but taking a culmination of them. So the first series is obedience over performance, and that helps you to go deeper into the teachings that I do during the coaching mindful moments, where you can really take those tidbits and pour into yourself daily and get you on that scope of moving from your survival mode to a more sustainable living for your life, your family, your leadership, and your connections and relationships.
This has been a phenomenal conversation. I knew it would be, though.
It has been for me as well.
I want to do a rapid fire exercise because I'm very interested in how you would respond. So I'm going to say a word and I want you to just communicate the first word that comes to your head. Okay. This should be interesting. So we'll start with an easy one: survival.
Oh, sustainability.
um, success,
Impact.
empathy,
Others.
emotional intelligence.
I would then say empathy.
Why did you say others?
For empathy.
Yes.
For empathy.
Yes.
Um, because empathy for me is literally really walking in others' shoes and understanding, taking a moment to understand them. You may not agree, you may not have that experience, but being empathetic means that you are taking a moment to view it through the lens of others.
And why is that important in leaders going from survival to sustainability in their own individual spaces?
Because then again, it takes out the egotistical mindset of I am the only one that knows how to do this, because you are now, when you are in the I am the only one and I have the answers, you are not leaving room for others. You are not leaving room for those varying perspectives. You are not leaving room for others' experience. You are not leaving room for others' culture, others' ideas. And so then it leaves room for no individuality, no equity, no diversity. It just leaves room for just you. And so if you want to live by yourself, then do the I thing. And you can't, because I would tell my students, you may think that you want to be alone, but somebody's got to deliver your mail.
Mm.
Somebody has to, you have to get your food, all of those things. So we don't live in a society of I. It's not just you. There's others. And in order to make impact, you have to work with others. And in order to work with others, you have to open it up to understand that others have ideas, others have experience, others have creativity. And so that is important for generating impact. That is important for a sustainable lifestyle because then it lasts. And I like to think about, even with parents, if you are just operating from a me and I, a this and that, you are not setting yourself up for impact and longevity with your children. I love the fact that I have two grown-ups in their late 20s, and then I have a 10-year-old. Pray for me. Uh, but I get to see that perspective that what I do now is either going to make or break our relationship later, like my grown two. And so I need to parent my children. And when I'm talking about leaders, you need to lead the people you lead, and other parents parent your children, not for the right now, but you need to take into consideration others' perspective, being your people that you lead or your children, to understand that what you are parenting or who you are parenting or who you are leading is the person on the other side. And so when they get there, you're going to want them to want to come back, to want to be in relationship with you. That's that longevity. That's that sustainability that I'm speaking about. And not right now, they're doing it because they have to. Whether you're leading them, they have to have a paycheck. Whether you're parenting them, they need you to survive. But when they get to the space where they don't need, quote unquote, we always need somebody, but in the space of finances or resources, they're going to want to come back because of the environment that you created for them in that moment, in those moments.
Thank you so much for your time, for your gift, and for continuing to be a light. Even in this moment, I've recognized so many different things that I even need to implement in my own life. And if you're still listening, I want you to like, subscribe, and share this episode and watch it again so that you can understand the power of pausing. Because after this episode, I'm going to take my 5 minutes and really just pause and allow myself to be free in my own thoughts and enjoy that time, because you deserve it. And then after you finish pausing this episode, but then also pausing with yourself, I want you to go and support her by purchasing her program, by investing in her business, and by downloading the various resources that she has out there to be able to not just transform your leadership, but transform the lives that you are called to be able to transform. Thank you again for listening to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. Before we finish, I always ask a question. What type of culture are you spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Culture is in everything and everywhere. Make yours worth catching. We'll see you all next episode.